This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Matt Gupta.
Chapter 61. The King's Court. Conspirators's words had struck something in Alistair, and he acted on them immediately. He had spent the entire night with Conspirators, discussing points of preparing the kingdom for war. Most of what they spoke of were the orc tribes to the east. When the sun rose, it filled the entire room with red light and revealed just how much they had smoked. Alistair's lips were dry from the pipe weed, and his chest was tight. Conspiratoris had spent most of the night making shapes with the smoke. Not just simple shapes like circles or squares, but shapes like ships, horses, wagons, and birds. They had sent Alistair into an excited fervor, not seen in him since he was a small child. He had tried to do the same, but in this battle, he was outmatched. The servants brought him breakfast. Alistair had expected Conspiratoris to eat modestly, but he ate a full breakfast. Eggs, sausages, bacon, black bread and tomatoes, with a flagon of ale to wash it down. He let out a large belch, and a cloud of pipe smoke escaped from his mouth. He summoned his generals to his war room, alongside Conspiratoris. As soon as they arrived, they began discussing military matters. Not short-term matters, like what to do about Julius, but matters about their military logistics and what to do with conquered territory. "You're talking about a full-scale reform," Felthor frowned after a lengthy talk. "Yes," Alistair smirked. "An army at our gates or not, we must prepare for the future." "And how does this help us?" Baranis demanded irritably. She had evidently been interrupted in doing something important to be there. The issue they were discussing was of the standing army of the kingdom. For over 200 years, the kingdom's military had been under the command of the various houses maintaining their own soldiers, with the most powerful at the top. For almost all of that time, the power had lain with the House of Stewards. There had been no standing army for the kingdom for all that time, because the overall cost of it was staggering. The military was formed of volunteers, but all of those volunteers were people who were loyal to the private houses of the nobility, not to the kingdom. It had meant that the leadership of the armies were led by men who would be a terrible threat to the realm if they turned on the kingdom, or by inept politicians keen to find glory to further their careers. All the power that the Citadel had in these situations was that they granted the command to the army leaders. It was very little power in all respects, but it enabled the realm to not expend its treasury on the army in question. The commander of the army had to find, fund, and equip the forces to their own preference. This had varied throughout history from entire cavalry forces to heavily armed infantry, or even, in desperate cases, battalions of militia with pitchforks. The only way that the Citadel could fight a rogue commander was to revoke his command, as they had done with Feltor after his war with the Golden King. The act of revoking command was only done in extreme circumstances and required a majority vote in the Citadel to revoke. It was often a useless power, as a man who had the resources to fund an army had allies in the Citadel. In other words, the whole system was dangerously flawed. Alistair wanted to remedy this. "We need to ensure that any future parties cannot seize power in the same way that we have." "Do you mistrust your own people so much?" Pilimer folded his arms, affronted. "Loyalty only lasts as long as the man," Alistair sighed. "How will we know that the people will not rise up against us in a year, 10 years, or in a century? I plan to make a dynasty that will last." And how do you plan to do that without a male heir to your own name? Baranis mocked. Even you will not live forever. Alistair nodded. I am considering that, but that is a discussion for another time. We need to prepare a standing army loyal to the realm and placed under a commander specifically chosen for such a deed. For centuries, we have relied on the chance that men and women are worthy of commanding their forces. If they are not, then we lose the army. We need to stop relying on the rich and powerful to fight for us. Allow the men on the ground to fight for their own homes and for a cause they can believe in, not just for the glory of their masters. And who will supply this army? Pillimore demanded. Each of the lands will supply men to fight in the royal army, Alistair declared. We will make an army of 10,000 to start with. If luck holds and we can support it, then we shall invest further. And who shall command this royal army? Baranis asked. It will surely be a position of great power and honour. I, Alistair agreed. The commander will have a place in the Citadel high seats, and it will be an elected office with a set term. We cannot have men gaining too much power over time. The others weren't so enthused by this idea. Being warriors themselves, they preferred practicality over politics. Questions like, what would happen if politics catches the leader mid-battle? And points like, they'll become too focused on politics, were discussed at length, but Alistair was set. He had the support of Felthor behind him, so eventually the others were won over, mainly by Felthor reminding them that the real point was to get the army raised. They could discuss the details later. In the city, things were back to normal. Martial law had been lifted, but the soldiers were still patrolling the streets. The morning routine for the common people was assembling in the square to listen to the announcer report on the day's events, both past and upcoming. Now that normality had returned, the city had a lot to catch up on. The announcer was a broad man who was so clean-shaven and oiled his chin appeared to shine in the light. The crowd was captivated by his voice. This was a man who had never suffered an interruption in his entire life. In the multicultured crowd, Marius listened with an attentive ear. Citadel sits tomorrow, the announcer declared, throwing his arms wide. No petitions to be placed before His Excellency Alistair. No whore gatherings, slave markets or smoke trades are to be held during this time. The Citadel has spoken on a new law. No longer is it a crime to declare oneself as High King of the realm, as long as the declarer has the support of the majority in the Citadel. Marius smiled at this. With 100 men in the Citadel when it was at its height, Alistair would only need the same 65 men who had supported him or had been bribed to vote his way. As far as the voting statistics would go, every single man in the Citadel would vote towards Alistair. Marius mused over how history would judge that vote. His Excellency Alistair has decreed that the royal army of the kingdom is to be reinstated. Citizens that are of manhood must present themselves to the royal barracks for training and conscription. Any citizens found not to have reported to a sergeant will be charged with treason and cowardice. He exchanged his scroll for an unravelled one from his helper. His Excellency Alistair has given his royal pardon to members of the nobility. These men are under His Majesty's protection and must not be harmed. Cameron and Camirvan of House Fortunatus, Marcus Antonius, Philip Agrippa, Centurios Dominius and Citadel Captain Dervin. Even the announcer found the list of names odd, but he spun the story as if the concept was bold rather than dangerous and nodded impressed. Like the sheep that the people were, the people followed his line of thought and began to talk amongst themselves. The announcer moved to the next subject. He raised his brow once he glanced over it. The renegade Julius continues to terrorize the province of Roma. His Excellency Alistair advises all citizens to remain within the villain wall and to not try to pass Julius's horde. Citizens are reminded of their civic duty to report all suspicious activity to the town guard immediately. Julius is a traitor in all things, and all citizens must fight him however they can. If they cannot, then they must oppose him in their hearts and soul. Unlike the other messages, this was met with protest. The sheep had suddenly grown teeth. The announcer frowned at them all, irked by their assumption that they were entitled to an opinion. He did not continue until the crowd settled. His Excellency Alistair has decreed that, in light of the siege, the royal treasury will pay for 40,000 loaves of bread for the city to be fed. The bread is provided by the House of Bakers. The House of Bakers is the house for the kings and will not be beaten on quality. The corporate propaganda was boring for the announcer, and it showed. Marius continued to listen to the announcer. The topics had turned to smaller issues, bordering on trivial. A noble woman's cat had been stolen and was giving a reward for its return. There was a bargain sale on pottery and clay urns, and a reminder that children were not allowed to scale the city walls for sport. The disgraced storyteller Matthias of the Gupta tribes had been arrested by the College of Scripture and was to be stoned in the streets for poor taste in his storytelling. The announcer noted with some irony that any man or woman in attendance but hadn't thrown a stone would receive a substantial fine. Marius made to leave, but a patrol of soldiers came by, doing a lap of the square before moving on. When he was sure he could leave, he set off down the street. He followed the narrow corridors that ran along the outer wall. From here, he could hear the sounds of construction as the city walls were being repaired. He met a spot where the narrow streets met a main highway. He waited in the shadows, waiting for another patrol to go past, and then cross the road. This part of the lower quarter was the red light district, where all of the brothels that had survived were. He found the building he needed and entered. The madam of the building was hardly pleased to see him. "Nay," she barked, making a whip-like motion at him. "We'll be having none of your soldier kind here. This is a house for the quality." "Peace, madam." Marius held up his hands, not at all perturbed, aside from her extensive use of makeup. "I am here for my master." The madam narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Who is your master?" "Admiral Mistnir, madam." "Oh," the madam said, lowering her guard. "In the back. Touch any of my girls, and I will take your hand." She brandished the item she'd been threatening him with, a jade-studded curved dagger, favoured by southern warriors. Marius nodded and made for the door behind the madam, taking care to walk on the side of her that wasn't protected by the machete. He entered the brothel and was greeted by a whore who was clad only in golden chain jewellery. She had contorted herself so that her legs were drawn over her head to present her sex to anyone entering in the brothel. Marius smiled and enjoyed the view, noting that her sex was slightly open. She had evidently been penetrated recently. He examined the chains around her waist and took the key that was dangling between her legs. She smiled up at him, invitingly. Marius grimaced. He had things to do and couldn't linger. So he took a moment to run the key under his nose, savouring the woman's scent. He winked at her and ran his hand over her wet sex. He used the key to open a door with a blue curtain and entered the room. A number of men were waiting for him, all of them crammed into one room. "Gentlemen," Marius greeted loudly, bringing the room to silence. He breathed in the scent of cinnamon, which was burning in the nearby brazier. "Thank you for coming." The doors closed and locked ominously. "Why are we here?" a gruff voice demanded. "In this dishonourable place. The topic of this visit here, Marius stepped down the steps and walked amongst them, taking each of them in turn, is treason. Treason in the most dangerous kind. Alistair hasn't even been coronated yet, and you seek to take him from his throne. No, my friends, Marius's smile never faltered. I seek to show you that Alistair isn't the only man in the world. And who would you have us follow? No one. Marius shrugged after a dramatic pause. I would have you follow the realm. The war is fast approaching. Alistair is a single man. We don't need a man, we need a legend. I know several. You mean Julius? I mean the kingdom. Marius clapped his hands on the man's shoulder. Julius is a traitor after all. But the realm, however, is a different beast altogether. What would you have us do? Nothing. Marius waved his hands as if shooing away smoke. He smirked wickedly. Nothing? One of the nobles snorted. You drag us here to discuss nothing? Nothing is a problematic thing. Marius finished this statement with a hiss. I would have you bide your time. Do nothing to provoke Alistair's wrath, nor make a move against him when he is vulnerable. Neither would you report our forces moving through your land or move against us in combat. There was a long silence. You are right, the noble he'd addressed said. That will be expensive. Then let us discuss how expensive. Marius smiled and gestured to the small table in the room. Conspirator huffed and puffed as he walked through Julius's camp. Most of the men ignored him, but the elves greeted him as if he were a god amongst them. He walked right up to Julius's tent. His knights moved forward to stop him. State your business. My business is my own, Conspirator glowered. Now stand aside. The knights did not make any indication of moving. Move on, old man. Stand down, my friends, the swan called out, stepping out from the shadows behind him. He made a twitch-like motion to the knights, and they stood down. What do you want here, immortal? Where is Julius? Conspirator demanded. What does it matter? The swan retorted. You consort with Alistair, who wants to destroy us. Why should we admit you? Peace, my friend. Julius stepped out of the tent, the knights parting to let him out. I never expected to meet you in my life, let alone here and now. And why is that? Conspirator snorted. Who are you to make assumptions about me? No one, apparently, Julius answered immediately. Oh, Conspirator frowned. He seemed disappointed by the lack of babbling on Julius's part. Very well then. What do you want here? Julius folded his arms. I thought you were in bed with my father and his cause. Oh, I am. They went into the tent and sat down. Hypatia was looking into the water again, but stood up as Conspirator entered. Cousin, she declared. They embraced, somewhat awkwardly on Conspirator's part, and exchanged a kiss. It has been too long. Yet not so long as it makes me glad to see you. Conspirator inhaled her perfume. He apparently did not find it to his taste. The elven warriors in the tent drew their swords. Put those away. I could cut each of you down and not disturb a hair in my beard. It is of no matter, Hypatia smiled. You are right, cousin. The years do not make you any more appealing either. Go play hero, baby cousin. Your elders have things to do. She turned and went back to her basin of water. I do not play games, Conspirator retorted. I have a much more dangerous agenda. We are not pawns in your game, the swan protested sternly. We are all pawns, Conspirator droned. And it is not my game. It is the game. If the kingdom is to survive, it must unite. You have to make peace with your father and fight as one. Easier said than done. My father's civil war is ready to tear the kingdom apart. How is that saving the realm? And what exactly do you think you are doing? Conditoris leaned forward. How are you benefiting the realm? Our plan is set, Hypatia said, not taking her eyes off the water. We act at nightfall. Will you, beloved cousin? We will. Julius raised an eyebrow and folded his arms. Why don't you sit back and watch? Alistair entered his chambers with a great spring in his step. It had been a good day's work, and he was highly energized. He'd been working right into the night, and the only light was coming from the candles that his servants had set up for him. He disrobed from his regal garb and stood in the moonlight in his cream-coloured small cloths. He looked out at the villum, seeing the pinpricks that were the fireplaces in Julius's army. He poured himself out a cup of water and looked out into the darkness. A gust of wind blew and the water in the cup rippled. A naked leg stepped out of the shadows and moved towards Alistair. He didn't notice her presence until she wrapped her arms around him and rested her head on his back, much like a lover would. They almost look like the stars, don't they? She whispered, as if they had been in deep conversation on the subject. If the stars were thousands of men coming to kill us, Alistair agreed, half ignoring her presence. Hypatia smiled. Alistair turned and kissed her intently, dropping the cup of water to break apart on the floor. She didn't resist, letting him kiss her mouth and then her cheeks and neck. Before long, his undergarments were off, and he was in bed with Hypatia. He kept expecting to wake up, but he didn't. They were tied in a knot together as Alistair thrust into her harder and harder. They had each other 3 times that night, and each time seemed more energized than the last. Just as he reached his climax, a war horn exploded along the wall. What the fuck? Alistair groaned. He tried to pull out, but Hypatia wrapped her leg around him, which caused him to ejaculate more. What's going on? The door exploded open, and one of his knights rushed in. Your Grace, Oh. What's going on? Alistair fought out of Hypatia's grip. It's Julius. The knight immediately regained his composure. He's crossed the villum and is attacking the city wall. What? Alistair demanded. He looked at Hypatia, who had a terrible smile on her face as she retracted her shining leg. How many? His entire army, the knight exclaimed. The men patrolling the fields were broken without a fight. By the Father, Alistair gasped. Get Felthor, Baranis, Pillimore, all of them. Alistair rushed to the window to look out onto the villum field. He could see the firelight of torches covering the whole land, illuminating the army that was marching across the vast stretch of land. The rhythmic thumps of their footsteps echoed up even to where Alistair stood. He suddenly realized many hours had passed, and dawn was approaching. Falthor's already marshalling his forces. The knight shifted, all but openly urging Alistair to hurry up. But the wall is not yet complete. Take her into custody, Alistair shouted, pulling on his undercloths. Bring my armor and sword. Take who, my lord? The knight suddenly went slack. Alistair looked at the bed. Hypatia was gone, leaving only a wet puddle on the bed, which was dripping onto the floor. Alistair didn't dwell on the subject and continued to get dressed. He threw himself into his armor, ignoring the wound in his shoulder or the slickness of his waist. His horse was waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs to the citadel. He rode to the edge of the city and onto the wall. Falthor was readying to lead his first cohorts of men through the gate. You can't defeat the Fountain Legion, Alistair called out to him. I know, Falthor called back. He's not attacking with the Legion. It's his freedmen. The former slaves. Alistair looked out at the battlefield. The army of liberated king's men was close enough to see the individual silhouettes of the men. Take them all, Destroy them. Will do, Your Majesty, Turgon smiled, bowing with a great twirling of his hands. It's good to be back on a horse again. Let's fuck them up, he yelled to his cavalry, and they charged out of the gatehouse. What are you planning, Julius? Alistair whispered. You cannot defeat us with just your slaves. If he was going to answer you, we wouldn't be here, Barani said, as she joined him on the wall. He's got a plan, Alistair muttered. He has magic behind him as well. The elven woman is a witch. He sent her to distract me from the fight. I can tell, Barani sniffed disappointedly. She could smell the scent of sex on him. Set a watch on the surrounds, Alistair ordered, ignoring the comment written in her gaze. Watch for any attempts of flanking maneuvers or infiltration. He's too honourable for sneak attacks. Barani shook her head. He was, Alistair sighed, looking out to watch Turgon charge his battered cavalry into the flanks of the attacking horde. That's why I'm worried. I do not know what my son has become.